In 1865, Don Bosco gave some of his best goodnight talks to the Oratory boys, which I've combined to make this episode. The saint talks about how he converted a hardened sinner on his deathbed and told of some incredible local apparitions of Our Lady that were suppressed by civil authorities. The most impressive part is that he was able to see Our Lady battling the influence of demons over boys that were enslaved to sin, which greatly boosted my confidence in her. The Miracles and Prophecies of St. John Bosco, a project of America Needs Fatima. I'm your host, Matthew Miller. Subscribe for new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm going to tell you about something wonderful tonight. In recent years, Our Lady has graciously appeared several times to her devotees. For instance, in 1846 to two young shepherds in La Salette, France. Among other things, she predicted that the potato crop and vineyards would become diseased, as in fact they did. She revealed that blasphemy, working on Sundays, and irreverence in church had provoked her son to anger. In 1858, she appeared to little Bernadette at Lourdes and asked her to pray for sinners. At Taggia, Our Lady moved her eyes. At Vicovaro, she did the same in the presence of many witnesses. At Spoleto, Our Lady's picture continues to work great miracles. This evening, I read of another wondrous event which took place in Tuscany. Mary's image suddenly appeared on the wall of a small house. Seeing it and feeling inspired to great trust in Our Lady, several sick people touched that image and were instantly cured. The word spread fast and crowds flocked to the spot. Civil authorities sent in carabinieri to disperse the crowds and cordon off the place. Arrests were made, but for every person arrested, 100 more swarmed to the spot. When a wall was erected in front of the holy image to conceal it, the same image showed up on that wall. The wall was then boarded up, but it was no use. The image now appeared on the wooden barrier. The crowd's enthusiasm soared to new heights. The carabinieri themselves, who, as the anti-clericals put it, had been dispatched to put an end to superstition, were found kneeling in prayer before the image. We too, my dear children, live amid Our Lady's favors and wonders. When I have more time, I'll tell you in detail what Our Lady has graciously done in this very house of ours. You'll ask, what do these apparitions of Mary mean? They are tokens of her mercy. The Blessed Virgin, like a good mother, seeing danger threatening her children, hurries to their rescue. Do you want to please your Heavenly Mother? Practice the virtue dearest to her, the virtue of chastity. Our Lady doesn't care for the homage of those who want to remain in mortal sin. Once there was a man who had long been living in sin. Still, he never let a day pass without offering Mary some prayer or greeting. As he kept this up without amending his sinful life, the merciful Mother of God appeared to him one night. A very handsome youth stood before her, carrying choice tidbits of food on a tray covered by a filthy, smelly napkin. Our Lady asked the man to help himself from the tray. "No thanks," he replied. "That napkin turns my stomach." "I feel the same way about your prayers and devotions because of your many sins," she replied. "You would relish these choice tidbits except for the filthy rag covering them. I too would love your devotions, but for the sins which defile your soul." Then she vanished. That man, touched by her motherly rebuke, went to confession, turned over a new leaf, and persevered in God's grace. Recently, there was a wealthy man, bedridden for 2 months, who seemed to be worsening daily. A devout friend of his advised him to straighten out his temporal affairs and make his will. He also boldly suggested that it would be wise to send for a priest. "Oh no," the sick man replied. "That's one thing I won't do. I will have no priest in my house." Yet, his friend insisted, it would be better. "Nothing doing. I never wanted to hear about confession even when I was well, much less now that I'm sick." "Would you mind if Don Bosco came to you?" "He's welcome as long as he doesn't speak of confession." Last Saturday, I took the invitation and called on that sick man. I was courteously received and ushered into his room. The patient seemed very happy to see me. As I usually do with people of that sort, and with good results, I began telling him funny stories, which made us both laugh so heartily that the sick man asked me to stop because it was just too much. "Very well then," I said, "let's shift to something serious." "Fine, but keep confession out of it. That's the condition I laid down for your visit. But, my friend, how can you expect me not to talk about confession when you yourself are the first to mention it? You've gotten me started on it. I won't ask you to make your confession, but let me at least talk about it. So I began to tell him of his past life, and by minutely describing his deplorable spiritual state, made him realize the need of returning to God's grace. He listened intently, without interruption, until I was through. "How did you know all that?" he asked. "Oh, it's simple," I replied. "I just say some magic words, and they instantly open up anybody's conscience to me." "Then I don't have to confess anything. You already did it for me." "Yes, my friend. Are you willing to admit that you're guilty of all these sins, are sorry for them, ask God's pardon, and firmly resolve to lead a better life if God restores you to health?" "Yes, I am." "Good." Then picking up bad books and papers from his bedside table, I asked him, "May I throw these into the fire?" "But why?" "Because either they burn to ashes, or you land into hell's everlasting fire." "All right, the books can go." I threw them into the fireplace. "There is yet more, my friend," I continued. "You must get rid of so-and-so at once." He raised a world of difficulties, but in the end he yielded, though very reluctantly. "Now," I said, "I can absolve you from your sins." Truthfully, he was sufficiently sorry. I spoke to him about receiving Holy Communion, but he wasn't too keen about it. He declined with the excuse that it would be too much trouble and that it wasn't really necessary. I didn't insist. After all, he had made his confession, and that was what had mattered most. Before leaving, I told his family that if he should ask for viaticum, they should call a priest from the parish, and that they should send me word if the patient's condition worsened. I received no call, but one day I went to see him anyway. Unfortunately, he had already died. In his last days, he kept choking, but still hoped to recover. He got the best doctors and promised them 50,000 lire if they would cure him. The day before he died, a friend called on him to warn him that his condition was critical. "My friend," he told him, "money can buy anything, but it cannot bribe death. You'd better think seriously of the life to come." The poor man calmed down, resigned himself like a good Christian, and, after a little more suffering, passed away. My children, I can hardly call this an ideal death. Yet, since he made his confession and died resigned to God's will, we have reason to hope that the Lord dealt mercifully with him. I'd like to stress one thing for your benefit, the words of the patient's friend. Money can buy anything, but it cannot bribe death. We must be prepared because when death comes, we cannot send him away for all the money in the world. My children, should death strike now, would you be ready? Most of you are, I hope, but unfortunately, a few are not because they're in mortal sin. If they could only see the horrible fiend on their back, they would be terrified. For some time I have wanted to warn them, but I have waited, hoping they would reform themselves. I will wait a few more days only, and then I'll tell them. I could single them out now, but I will not do so. I shall warn them privately. Poor boys. The devil, my dear children, goes about among you, and I see him seeking to devour you. He tails you and tries to trip you, but at your side stands a beautiful lady stretching forth a hand to steady you. You will not fall if you take hold of it. What would you say of those who refuse her help in danger, or even bite or strike out at her hand? "I pity you," she tells them, and withdraws her hand. "You refuse my help. Go your own way to perdition, then. I have done all I could to save you, but you wouldn't let me. You have yourselves to blame for your eternal damnation. My children, that horrible fiend is the devil. The beautiful lady is the Blessed Virgin Mary. Good night." Thank you all so much for watching, and if you'd like to hear another story about how St. John Bosco resurrected a young man from the dead just so that he could hear his confession, click on the link above me here. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you. Ready to go?